It wasn't supposed to be a historic night. Not like this. Not with one of America's top intelligence officials reduced to a trembling shadow of himself. Not with over 200 million people watching in stunned silence. It was meant to be just another political interview. A chance for Kash Patel, the controversial CIA director, to set the record straight, to remind the world of American dominance, to put a young African leader in his place. At least, that's what he thought. But what unfolded, live on CNN that evening, would shake the foundations of global power and leave Patel paralyzed, mentally, emotionally, and politically. If you missed it, you missed history. But we're about to rewind the clock. Because this wasn't just a scandal, it was a masterstroke of strategy, courage, and revelation. It was the moment the world realized not all heroes wear suits. Sometimes they wear silence, sometimes they wear calm, and sometimes they carry the truth like a weapon. This is the story of how Ibrahim Traoré, the young president of Burkina Faso, brought down the most powerful man in American intelligence, live on air in real time, and how one invitation, one broadcast, turned into a global reckoning. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you saw a man, confident, arrogant, certain of his control, completely fall apart? Not from bullets, not from protests, but from facts, from evidence, from truth so raw and undeniable. It peeled away every layer of power he thought protected him. That's what happened to Kash Patel, a man who believed he could manipulate the world with a smile and a soundbite, until someone smarter, calmer, and infinitely more prepared looked him in the eye and said, "You want honesty? You'll get it on your terms, on your stage, in front of your people. Now, why does this matter to you?" Because this wasn't just a takedown. This wasn't just one man falling from grace. This was a window into something much darker, a criminal empire built inside the CIA, a network of corruption that crossed borders, sold secrets, and profited from pain, and the man at the center of it, the same man smiling into cameras that morning, rehearsing lines like an actor before a play. Patel thought he was writing the script, but Ibrahim held the ending. This is not just another celebrity scandal. This is a celebrity undercover story like no other. A real-life thriller that exposes how far power will go to protect itself, and how one calm, calculated move can unravel a web of lies spun across continents. We'll take you inside the hidden bunker in Ouagadougou, where the most damning files were uncovered. We'll walk you into the CNN studio in Atlanta, where the world watched Kash Patel's face melt in horror. We'll show you the trail of money, blood, and betrayal, all hidden in plain sight. You might think this is fiction, you might wish it was, but everything you're about to hear is backed by evidence shown live on air. Evidence so disturbing. It triggered a global manhunt, multiple arrests, and the biggest intelligence shakeup in modern history. And it all began with a single invitation, a friendly request for dialogue. That became an open grave. So if you think you've seen scandal, if you believe you understand power, think again, because by the end of this story, you'll know what it means when a man paralyzes himself with nothing but the truth. Welcome to Celebrity Undercover Stories. This is the rise and catastrophic fall of Kash Patel, and the moment the world discovered who really rules in Africa. Now let's go back to where it all began, the calm before the storm, and the man who would flip the global chessboard, one revelation at a time. Stay with us, because what's coming next changes everything. It was a calm morning in Ouagadougou, the kind of morning that carries the scent of coffee, warm sun, and routine. The streets buzzed with motorbikes, street vendors, and the quiet hum of a nation waking up. But inside the presidential palace, the atmosphere was different, much different. President Ibrahim Traoré sat by the window sipping tea, 35 years old, sharp, disciplined, and already more seasoned than most world leaders twice his age. He had just finished reviewing a routine briefing when a red envelope was placed on his desk. Not email, not a call, a formal hand-delivered message. That alone was a red flag. He opened it. Inside, an invitation from Kash Patel, the director of the CIA, requesting a joint interview, live on CNN broadcast worldwide. The stated purpose? to clear up misunderstandings about US-African security cooperation. Ibrahim read it twice, then once more. A chill passed through the room, not from the air, but from instinct, the kind of instinct that had kept him alive through revolutions, assassination attempts, and foreign manipulation. Interesting timing, he muttered. He pressed a button on the desk. Moments later, Dr. Alonso Ouedraogo, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, entered. Ibrahim slid the invitation across the table. Ouedraogo read it in silence, then looked up. "This could be a trap," he warned. "Kash Patel doesn't do diplomacy. He does domination." Ibrahim nodded slowly. He already knew that. He had spent the past year watching the pattern, how Patel used the guise of counter-terrorism to interfere in African politics, how he supported instability in the Sahel region, only to offer security solutions after the damage was done. Ibrahim had said no repeatedly, and now this. A smile in envelope form. A wolf offering to share the spotlight. He didn't like it, but he didn't fear it, because 1 week ago, everything changed. Major Umaru Sawado, head of national intelligence, entered the room. He was holding a black briefcase. "Mr. President," he said, closing the door behind him, "we have confirmation. The evidence is complete." He set the briefcase on the armored table. Ibrahim opened it, documents, photos, intercepted calls, and one devastating conclusion. Kash Patel wasn't just manipulating African policy. He wasn't just funding destabilization. He was orchestrating a global criminal network. From inside the CIA, weapons, drugs, even people, moved through military channels, all under the cover of American intelligence operations. Ibrahim stared at the evidence, then looked up. "So he wants to clear up misunderstandings," he smiled coldly. "We'll give him the opportunity, not in private, not behind closed doors, but live on the world stage." He closed the briefcase. With a soft click, "Prepare the team," he said. "In 48 hours, we're going to Washington." This wasn't about television anymore. It was about truth, exposing not just a man, but a machine, a system, one that had worn the mask of democracy while trafficking in darkness. That morning in Burkina Faso, the sky remained clear. The birds still sang. But inside the palace, war had already begun, not with guns, not with bombs, but with something far more dangerous, facts, and a leader who knew how to use them, because when the truth is powerful enough, even the calmest morning can become the eye of a storm. And Ibrahim Traoré was ready to walk straight into it. Next stop, Washington, D.C., and the moment everything would change. Beneath the presidential palace in Ouagadougou, there is a room few have ever entered. A steel-reinforced chamber, silent, windowless, surrounded by layers of encrypted surveillance blockers. It's not marked on any government blueprint, not even. American satellites know it exists. This is where secrets go to live or to die. And this is where President Ibrahim Traoré spent the 48 hours before the interview that would shake the world. The air was cold. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, on. The armored table before him, documents, photographs, hard drives, and satellite imagery. They weren't just files, they were weapons. Each one a bullet of truth aimed at one of the most powerful intelligence figures in the world, Kash Patel, and the criminal empire he built under the guise of U.S. foreign policy. Major Umaru Sawado stood beside him, stone-faced. "This is everything," he said. "The whole network, operations, payments, transport routes, all of it." Ibrahim didn't flinch. He picked up one photo, Kash Patel, standing beside military crates. Behind him, U.S. aircraft marked with CIA insignia. In the crate, cocaine. 40 kilograms. Mali. Dated 3 weeks ago. He turned to the next set of documents. Swiss bank transfers. Millions of dollars traced from CIA-linked accounts directly into Patel's personal accounts, all verified by independent European agencies, all irrefutable. "This," Ibrahim whispered, "isn't corruption. It's piracy." But that was just the beginning. Dr. Ouedraogo entered, holding a second file, even heavier than the first. His face was pale. "President," he said, placing it gently on the table, "we have confirmation of communications between Patel and known Mexican cartels. and 2 terrorist networks operating out of North Africa and the Middle East. The room fell silent. No one spoke, because this was no longer about covert destabilization. This was profit from pain, weapons for blood, trafficking in lives, and using US diplomatic cover to protect the operation. Ibrahim opened the file. Inside, transcripts of phone calls, encrypted chat logs, audio recordings, and one message that sent a chill through everyone in the room. It was Patel, laughing, saying, "Terrorism makes great cover for distribution." That sentence alone was a confession and a revelation. Patel hadn't just bent the CIA for personal gain. He had transformed it into a cartel, a global shadow empire hiding beneath the American flag, and it was working until now. Colonel Kasum Koulibaly entered last holding. "A flash drive. No more rumors," he said. "We have the final piece." He inserted the drive into the secure projector, and the screen flickered to life. A video appeared, grainy but clear. Patel, in full view, supervising a drug shipment, speaking directly to American military personnel, giving orders, pointing at crates. The audio matched the date, time, and coordinates from satellite tracking. He wasn't just involved. He was running the operation from the top. Ibrahim stood still. He didn't rage. He didn't shout. He just nodded, slowly, deliberately. "This," he said, "is the moment the world finds out." He looked at the folder beside him, labeled Operation African Cleansing, the code name, a name as cold and brutal as the acts it hid, because this wasn't just about drugs or weapons or power. It was about eliminating governments, installing chaos, and using the cover of counter-terrorism to enslave entire regions to criminal networks. And now the architect of it all had asked for a live interview. In front of a global audience. It was poetic, it was perfect. Ibrahim looked around the room, each face steady, each man and woman ready to carry this truth into fire. "This is bigger than Patel," he said quietly. "It's about accountability. It's about exposing a system that's infected the world with silence and fear. And tonight we break that silence." He closed the folders, unplugged the drive, and with a single breath, prepared himself for war. Because when truth is armed with proof, even giants can fall, and in 24 hours the first domino would tip. In Washington, D.C., the sky was a crisp slate of blue. Spring trees swayed gently in the breeze, but inside CIA headquarters, the energy was electric, not with fear, with confidence, because Kash Patel was certain, absolutely certain, that he was about to win. He stood in his office, flanked by aides, sipping black coffee from a monogrammed mug. On his desk, a stack of prepared lines, meticulously crafted attacks, carefully rehearsed counters, and beneath it all, the same smug assurance he'd carried for years. "I'm going to make this kid look like a fool," he said, smiling. "Live on air. Global stage. No one will ever take him seriously again." His team chuckled. One of them chimed in. "Anderson Cooper, moderates. 1 hour open format." Patel nodded. "Perfect. 60 minutes is all I need to reassert who's really in charge in Africa." He wasn't worried. He wasn't even curious. To him, Ibrahim Traoré was just another young idealist, a well-spoken distraction, nothing more. He paced slowly, thinking out loud. "I'll question his legitimacy. His record, his experience. Frame him as impulsive, naive. Make it look like America's the only grown-up in the room. Every word was calculated, every gesture pre-planned, because Kash Patel wasn't just a spy. He was a performer, a master manipulator, a man who believed perception was more powerful than reality. He believed the camera would protect him, that charm would override suspicion, and that the American flag behind him would neutralize any accusation. But what he didn't know was that the stage had already been flipped, that the script had been rewritten, and that the man he thought would stutter was about to detonate truth like dynamite. As Patel rehearsed his takedown, thousands of miles away, Ibrahim sat in silence. No lines, no performance, just documents, truth, and a calm, unnerving readiness. But back in Washington, none of that mattered. Not yet. Patel was still riding high. He imagined the headlines. Patel, Silences African critic in live interview. CIA Director sets record straight on global stability. He even rehearsed his closing line. One agency, one nation, one global standard of truth. He grinned at his reflection in the mirror. He adjusted his tie, polished, sharp, arrogant. "Let's show them who the real adults in the room are," he said. But even as he spoke, cracks had already begun to form, because arrogance blinds, and overconfidence dulls instinct. Had he looked closer, had he listened more carefully, he might have noticed the shifting tone, the unease in global intelligence chatter, the quiet mobilization of European law enforcement, even Anderson Cooper's unusually careful prep briefings. But he didn't. He was too busy posing, too busy practicing. Rhetorical ambushes. He thought he was preparing for a debate. He was walking into a trial, his own. Every minute he spent mocking Ibrahim's youth was another step toward his own downfall. Every smug laugh another nail in the coffin of his credibility, and every time he imagined himself victorious, he failed to see the iceberg beneath the calm sea, because sometimes the most dangerous enemy isn't loud. It's patient, disciplined, unshakable, and it holds the truth like a blade, ready, waiting, unseen, until it's too late. Kash Patel didn't know it yet, but in less than 24 hours, he would no longer be feared. He would no longer be respected. He would no longer be free. And when the broadcast began, he wouldn't be the one delivering the performance. He would be the punchline. Because while he rehearsed manipulation, Ibrahim Traoré had prepared something far more powerful. Reality. The kind you can't deflect with spin. The kind that hits harder than any attack line. The kind that leaves a man paralyzed. And this time, there would be no script to save him. The evening of May 27, 2025, was anything but ordinary. In Atlanta, the CNN headquarters buzzed with a rare kind of electricity. Producers whispered urgently into headsets. Lighting engineers ran final tests. Security teams paced the corridors with more intensity than usual. This wasn't just another broadcast. This was history in the making, and everyone knew it. In Studio A, Anderson Cooper stood near his desk, reviewing his final notes, calm on the surface. But something didn't feel right. He had moderated hundreds of global interviews, presidents, generals, CEOs. But tonight was different. He could feel it in his bones. Something unscripted was coming, something big. He glanced across the control room. Producers were unusually tight-lipped. Even CNN's legal team was on standby. Then he saw it. The flag from Burkina Faso being carefully positioned on the dual-screen setup. The satellite feeds tested again. One for Washington, D.C., where Kash Patel was seated confidently in a sleek government studio, and one for Ouagadougou, where President Ibrahim Traoré sat in his presidential office, calm, still, unreadable. The split-screen image would soon beam across 89 countries, simultaneously. Patel adjusted his tie, smiling at his own reflection in the camera lens. He looked sharp, trim, unbothered. He tapped his earpiece and nodded to the tech crew. "All good," he said. The smugness in his voice was unmistakable. Backstage, one of his aides whispered, "This is your moment, sir." Patel smirked. "I was born for it." Across the world, Ibrahim Traoré placed a slim leather folder on the desk beside him. It was unmarked, but inside, everything. A ticking bomb of truth. He didn't glance at it, didn't rehearse a single word. His hands were steady, his posture relaxed, but in his eyes, a quiet storm, going live in 3 minutes, live in 3. Fair voice echoed through the earpieces of both men. The world was watching. From boardrooms in Washington to internet cafes in Lagos, from military bases in Europe to crowded taxis in South America, everyone tuned in, everyone waited. CNN's logo flashed on screen, dramatic intro music played, and then Anderson Cooper appeared. "Good evening, world," he began, his voice smooth but weighted. "Tonight, an extraordinary meeting. A conversation between the director of the CIA, Kash Patel, and the president of Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traoré." The screen split. 2 men. 2 faces. 2 agendas. "Director Patel," Anderson said, "you requested this interview. What? Would you like to clarify? Patel leaned forward, confident, polished. Thank you, Anderson, he said with a slight smirk. There have been many distorted narratives about our operations in Africa. We're here to clear the air, to demonstrate the CIA's real commitment to regional stability. It was a rehearsed line. He delivered it perfectly. Anderson turned. President Traoré, your thoughts on cooperation with U.S. agencies? Ibrahim offered a slight smile. Not forced, not aggressive, just calm. Mr. Cooper, he began, his voice steady, cooperation requires mutual honesty. Unfortunately, we've found Mr. Patel's definition of cooperation differs significantly. Patel chuckled, condescending, dismissing. President, I understand that young leaders often have limited perspectives on global complexities. The line was meant to humiliate, to belittle. But Ibrahim didn't flinch. He simply tilted his head. Complexities, he repeated, like using CIA aircraft to smuggle drugs across continents? Silence. The studio froze. Anderson blinked. What? Was that, Mr. President? It's not an accusation, Mr. Cooper, Ibrahim said, reaching for the folder. It's documented evidence. He opened it, and the temperature in the studio dropped 10 degrees. Patel's smile faltered, just slightly. On the screen, bank account numbers, transfer receipts, timestamps. Millions of dollars moved from CIA-linked accounts to Patel's personal, Swiss accounts. Mr. Patel, Ibrahim asked gently, do you recognize these transactions? Patel stared, blinking, silent. This is absurd, he said, forcing a laugh. Fabrication. But the sweat had already begun to bead on his temple. Anderson leaned forward. Director Patel, would you like to respond to these documents? The silence stretched. Then Patel cleared his throat. They're forgeries. Really? Ibrahim replied, still calm. These documents have been verified by Swiss banks and by the U.S. Treasury Department. Patel looked stunned, trapped. The camera caught every flicker in his expression, every tremor in his hand. Anderson looked at both men. The story had shifted. This was no longer a joint interview. This was a reckoning, and the world was only just beginning to understand how deep it would go. The studio lights hadn't changed. The cameras still rolled, but something in the room had shifted. You could feel it. The tension, the stillness. Like the air itself was waiting to see what would happen next. Ibrahim Traoré sat with the folder open. Beside him, inside, cold, clinical proof. On the screen, rows of numbers appeared, routing digits, account IDs, transfer logs, each line tied directly to one name, Kash Patel. Director of the CIA, Ibrahim leaned forward. His voice was calm, measured. Mr. Patel, he said softly, do you recognize these? The screen showed millions of dollars moving in and out of Swiss accounts, dates spanning from January to April, all linked to CIA accounts, all redirected into Patel's personal financial web. Patel didn't answer. His lips parted, but nothing came out. He stared at the screen like it might blink first. Anderson Cooper stepped in. Director Patel, you are being shown what appear to be verified financial transactions. Do you deny these transfers occurred? A bead of sweat slid down Patel's forehead. He blinked, swallowed, and forced out a weak laugh. These are forged. He tried to straighten his posture, tried to act unfazed. These documents, they're not real. But his voice betrayed him. The tone cracked. The confidence evaporated. Ibrahim didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Verified by Swiss banks, he said, confirmed by independent investigators. And, curiously, also acknowledged by the U.S. Treasury Department. Another screen lit up. Official stamps, signatures, third-party confirmations, and then the first gut punch. A line appeared on screen. Operation Commodity Exchange, below. It, a description. A secret program allegedly used by Patel to move cocaine across African corridors, using CIA aircraft. He used the name Commodity Exchange as a euphemism for narcotics distribution, classified on paper, but now fully exposed. Patel leaned back. His hands now gripped the armrests of his chair. White-knuckled, Anderson turned, slowly, Director Patel's, is this true? Are you using government resources for illicit trafficking? No, Patel barked. This is disinformation. This is an attack. But he was panicking, you could see it. The sweat was now visible on his neck, his breath short, his eyes scanning the camera, the studio, the shadows. Ibrahim didn't blink. He reached into the folder again. "Mr. Cooper," he said, "would you like to see aerial photographs?" He pulled out still frames, and on the screen, Patel standing beside crates. Markings clear, a U.S. military aircraft in Mali. Dated May 15th. The crates, 340 kilograms of cocaine. "Deep fake," Patel snapped, now visibly shaking. "That is not real." "It is not fake, Mr. Patel," Ibrahim replied. "We have not just images but 47 minutes of video. You are seen giving instructions. You are heard discussing shipping timelines." Anderson's voice dropped. "President Traore, have these materials been authenticated?" "They have," Ibrahim answered, "by 5 independent agencies, including European law enforcement." And then came the silence, the kind of silence that burns, that presses down on everyone listening, the kind that screams louder than words. Patel's mouth opened, closed. His voice tried to return, but failed him. He was cornered, exposed, unmasked on live television, not by politics, not by scandal, but by precision. Ibrahim wasn't there to argue, he wasn't there to accuse, he was there to reveal, and the first drop had landed like thunder. The money trail wasn't speculation, it was fact, and it was just the beginning. Anderson leaned in, his voice almost a whisper. "Director Patel, do you have anything else to say?" Patel's eyes were glassy now. He looked to the side as if someone might come rescue him, but no one did. Because this wasn't fiction. This wasn't a drama with edits and second takes. This was real, and the world had just seen the beginning of the end, of a man, of a system, and of a carefully curated illusion, shattered by truth. At first, Kash Patel didn't speak. He couldn't. He sat there, frozen, as if paralyzed by the screen in front of him. The words "Operation Commodity Exchange" still hovered behind him in bold red letters. And now, a new image appeared, zoomed, in grainy but clear. There he was, Kash Patel, at a U.S. military base in Mali. His hand rested on a crate. The label: Diplomatic Priority, U.S. Intel. The contents: cocaine, hundreds of kilograms. Patel's face was unmistakable. Anderson Cooper cleared his throat. He wasn't just a moderator anymore. He was a witness. "Director Patel," he said carefully, "what do you say to these images?" Patel finally responded. His voice was brittle, deep fake. "That's not me." Ibrahim Traoré's face didn't move. He simply nodded once, calm, unbothered. "As I said," Ibrahim replied, "this footage is supported by time-stamped military satellite logs and internal communications from the base commander." He tapped the folder gently. "Shall we play the video?" The control room paused. No one had expected this. Patel shifted in his chair. "No video," he snapped. "That material is classified." Classified. "To protect what exactly?" Ibrahim asked. "To protect a criminal operation? Or to protect you?" Patel's hands trembled. He tried to push back. "Terrorists, foreign actors, they fabricate footage like this every day. This is part of an information war." Anderson leaned forward again, his voice now steady, cool, journalistic. "So you're saying this is fabricated by terrorists?" "Yes," Patel shouted. "Enemies of America." Ibrahim didn't raise his voice. He just reached into the folder again. Another still frame appeared, this time an overhead drone image. Same base, same date. This one, captured from 400 feet above. Patel's figure was still visible, surrounded by crates, speaking to men in U.S. uniforms. "You were supervising the operation," Ibrahim said. "You spoke for 17 minutes about customs clearance procedures. We have the full conversation." The screen flickered again. Audio waveforms appeared, snippets of sound, Patel's voice, saying words like optimized delivery, safe corridors, and secondary routes via Bamako. Each word landed like a hammer. This wasn't deep fake. This wasn't CGI. This was real. Too real. Patel's last defense cracked in half. His eyes darted, his lips moved without forming words. I want legal counsel, he whispered. Anderson didn't react. He simply turned to Ibrahim. Mr. President. What else do you have? And that question. It opened the floodgates. Ibrahim tapped a new document. This is a shipment manifest, he said, dated April 12th, signed by Patel himself. It describes the movement of agricultural product prototypes. In reality, over 400 kilos of unrefined narcotics. Patel slammed his fist on the table. Stop this! This is an ambush! But his voice was unraveling. He sounded less like a leader and more like a man exposed. Anderson spoke gently. You requested this interview, Director Patel. You set the time, the format, the terms. You invited the world to watch. Now the world was watching something they'd never forget. Man-breaking, not under interrogation, not under torture, but under facts. Verified, documented, presented by a president who never raised his voice. The irony was brutal. Patel had walked into this studio expecting to dominate, to control the narrative. Instead, he had triggered his own public dismantling. And the best part? He didn't even see it coming. Mr. Patel, Ibrahim said softly, we haven't even reached the most serious charges yet. But you already seem shaken. Perhaps because deep down, you know none of this is fake. Silence returned. Long, sharp, unforgiving. And in that silence, the world realized one thing. When the truth is this detailed, this layered, this undeniable, there's only one reason left to deny it. Because you know it's true. Ibrahim Traoré didn't pause. He didn't flinch. He simply turned to the next page in the folder and looked directly into the camera. Mr. Patel, he said, his voice as calm as ever, would you care to explain Operation Human Market, the FA? Air in the studio turned cold. Anderson Cooper leaned in slowly. President Traore, did you say human market? Yes, Ibrahim replied, and I will now show you what it means. The screen behind him flickered again. This time, tables filled with data, routes, names, ages, countries, and one horrifying label at the top, Human Trafficking Manifest. Last 6 months. Anderson's face tightened. He looked sick. Kash Patel said, nothing. His lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. Ibrahim continued. In the last 6 months alone, he said, 247 women and children were moved through routes controlled by Mr. Patel's network. Most were sold into prostitution, others into forced labor. He tapped the page. These are not numbers. These are people. Patel shook his head. No, that's not true. His voice was thin, empty. But Ibrahim didn't stop. He moved to the next page. Here, he said, we have intercepted communications between Mr. Patel and 2 trafficking coordinators, discussing pricing structures, delivery reliability, and even time-sensitive inventory. Anderson winced at the word. Inventory, he echoed. That's how they describe children? Ibrahim nodded once. This is the language of criminals. Dehumanize, profit, repeat. Another slide appeared, a transcript. Patel's voice captured saying, push the next batch through Niger. Delay in Morocco last week hurt delivery time. Audience at home sat frozen. Millions of people across the globe, watching this, hearing this. Live. Kash Patel wiped his forehead. His hands trembled. This is a smear campaign. I have no knowledge of any such thing. Ibrahim raised a hand. Then perhaps he said gently, you can explain this. The screen changed again. This time an intercepted call, Patel's voice again, more direct, discussing units, shelter time, and resale contracts. The word units echoed through the studio like a hammer. I need a lawyer. Patel muttered again, but there was no pause in the broadcast. Because truth doesn't wait, and victims don't have time. Ibrahim spoke again. In one recording, Patel negotiates a higher price for a 12-year-old girl based on her clean health. Report! Anderson looked down, then up. He could barely find words. These are war crimes, he said softly. They're beyond that, Ibrahim replied. They're crimes against humanity. executed under the cover of intelligence operations, funded by US taxpayer dollars. The silence returned, heavy, unbearable, until Patel whispered, "Please, please stop." "Stop what, Mr. Patel?" Ibrahim asked, voice still measured. "Stop telling the truth? Stop seeking justice?" Anderson looked into the camera, his voice now shaky. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is no longer a diplomatic conversation. This is a global criminal investigation, unfolding live." And still, Ibrahim had more. He reached into the folder again, held up a photograph. A girl, age 9, last seen in a US military logistics camp, now missing. "Her name is Aminata," Ibrahim said. "She was kidnapped by a militia funded by one of Patel's indirect partners." He stared straight into the lens. "She never made it home. The image stayed on the screen too long, long enough to haunt." Patel looked away. Tears were visible now, but there were no apologies, no denials, just broken silence, the kind that comes. "When truth breaks through every lie, Mr. Patel," Ibrahim said, "you trafficked lives. You used state resources to create private profit. You turned children into merchandise." Anderson's voice cracked. "What happens now?" Ibrahim folded the last document. "Now the world decides. Now we ask how many more lives must be shattered before people like Patel are stopped. Now justice must speak louder than power." As the camera zoomed out, the image of Aminata stayed on screen, still smiling, still missing, and the man who could have saved her, now speechless, now seen, now exposed. The room had already seen too much silence, too much shock. But Ibrahim wasn't done, not yet, because the truth wasn't finished. He tapped the table once, firm, measured. "Mr. Cooper," he said, "what we've discussed so far, drugs, human trafficking, these are operational crimes. But what comes next," and he paused, "is betrayal." Anderson looked up, still trying to find words that made sense, still trying to catch up with reality. Ibrahim opened a new section of the folder. He didn't need to raise his voice, because what he held in his hand was louder than any shout. "These," he said, "are blueprints, classified schematics of US military bases, sold to Al-Qaeda." The words struck like lightning. Anderson dropped his pen. "What?" "These documents," Ibrahim continued, "were transferred in March. In exchange for $2.3 million in Bitcoin." Patel's eyes widened. His mouth moved, but no sound emerged. Not denial, not defense, just silence. And on screen, highlighted maps, zoomed-in areas, guard routes, drone blind spots, each one verified, each one deadly. "These files," Ibrahim said, "were used to coordinate 7 terrorist attacks in the last 2 years. 43 American soldiers died." Anderson leaned forward. Slowly, "Are you saying Kash Patel sold American defense secrets to Al-Qaeda?" "Yes," Ibrahim replied. "And we have the transaction records." The screen changed again. A Bitcoin wallet address. Transfers matched to IPs linked to Patel's CIA office. And then the names. Soldiers who had died in attacks, traced to compromised base layouts, faces, ages, cities. It wasn't abstract anymore. It was real, tangible, unforgivable. Patel covered his face with one hand. His other hand clutched the chair's edge. Anderson tried to stay professional, but his voice cracked. "President Traore, is there more?" "Yes," Ibrahim said quietly. He lifted another page, a list of CIA undercover agents sold to hostile governments. Anderson gasped. "You're saying American agents were executed?" Ibrahim finished. 23. "Confirmed, because their locations were traded for cash." The screen blurred for a moment. No one spoke. Even in the control room, utter stillness. Ibrahim didn't stop, because the truth doesn't pause for comfort. "In this recording," he said, tapping again, "Mr. Patel can be heard offering intelligence on the whereabouts of kidnapped US diplomats. In exchange for protection from drug cartels." The screen lit up. A transcript, Patel's voice. "If you keep the routes open, I'll make sure no raid touches you. I can give you the extraction timeline. 3 days later, those diplomats were dead. Ambush confirmed. Anderson sat back, hands shaking, eyes filled with disbelief. "Mr. Patel," he said, "do you deny this?" Nothing. Not a word. Just a slow shake of the head. Ibrahim closed the folder. He looked straight into the camera. Greed, he said, is what drove him. He had access to the most valuable intelligence on Earth, and he sold it. For power, for money, for protection. Anderson finally spoke again. "This is treason." "Yes," Ibrahim said. "By every legal, ethical, and moral standard, American soldiers died. Diplomats were slaughtered. Intelligence networks were dismantled. Because of one man's betrayal." Patel slumped in his chair, tears in his eyes. No rebuttal, no performance left, and the world watched. Not a debate, not a disagreement, but the live unraveling of a man who had sold out his own country and paid for it. With the silence that followed, Ibrahim spoke one last time. "This is not just an American crisis. This is a global one, because when the guardians of justice become merchants of crime, the whole world suffers. And tonight, the world saw it, unedited, undeniable, unforgivable." For a moment, the studio lights seemed dimmer, not because the brightness had changed, but because something darker had been pulled into the room, a truth more chilling than anything before. Ibrahim Traoré didn't hesitate. He opened a new folder. Thicker, more intricate, laced with danger. "This," he said, "is not just a scandal involving one man. This is a network, spanning agencies, governments, and cartels." Anderson Cooper blinked slowly, still processing, still recovering from what had just been revealed. And yet, here came more. On the screen behind them appeared a chart. Webbed out dozens of names, titles, positions, lines connecting them like a spider's trap. Senator Richard Hull, Ibrahim said, received $3.4 million to block investigations into Patel's operations. Congresswoman Maria Santos, $1.8 million to fast-track CIA budget approvals tied to criminal logistics. General Michael Brooks, $5.2 million to facilitate military base access for drug shipments. Anderson read the names silently, then said them out loud, as if hoping the repetition would make them less real. But it didn't. It only made the betrayal clearer. Ibrahim continued, "These are not random bribes. These are coordinated protections. System that shielded Patel while he turned American intelligence into a criminal marketplace." The screen shifted. Video clips now. Secret meetings, dark hotel rooms, conversations recorded in whispers. In one clip, Patel and Senator Hall sit at a table, drinks in hand, discussing how to bury the Morrison file. Anderson froze. Judge Patricia Morrison. Ibrahim nodded. April 8, 2025, declared dead after a car accident. But our forensic team found evidence of sabotage, brake lines severed, timing module hacked, cause of death, murder. The room dropped 10 degrees. Murder, Dav. A federal judge, to protect a trafficking empire. Patel didn't look up, he couldn't. Ibrahim moved forward. Our investigation uncovered recordings from a March 14th meeting. Patel, Senator Hall, and 2 cartel representatives. They discussed Judge Morrison as a liability. They planned her death. On the screen, the audio was faint, but clear enough. "We can't afford her curiosity," a voice said. Then, "We end it," said another. Anderson's mouth was dry. He tried to speak, only managed a whisper. "This is a conspiracy, at the heart of American government." "Yes," Ibrahim said, "and it extends beyond Washington." Bank records link Patel's network to offshore accounts used by at least 3 foreign governments. The screen showed transfers, countries unnamed flagged only by colors. "Strategic silence," Ibrahim said, "paid for by regimes that benefited from a weakened U.S. intelligence system." He tapped the table again. "One final document, the most terrifying part," he said softly. "They didn't just conspire to protect crimes. They planned new ones, targeted assassinations, judges, journalists, even rival intelligence operatives." He held up a photo, unpublished black and white. Patel in a room, handing a folder to a man later identified as a foreign assassin. Date stamped, location verified. "I believe," Ibrahim said, "that if tonight hadn't happened, you, Mr. Cooper, would have been next." Anderson froze, his face went pale. The control room behind the glass was completely still. The world watched in horror, because this wasn't just a criminal enterprise. It was a coup, a silent overthrow of law by greed, of justice by fear. And the ringleader was sitting in the very chair he had chosen, believing he would control the narrative. Instead, he had exposed the entire web. Ibrahim closed the folder and looked into the camera. "This is not just treason," he said. "This is high-level organized crime, from elected leaders, trusted generals, funded by American taxes." The camera zoomed out slowly. Kash Patel remained silent, his shoulders slumped, his eyes vacant. He was no longer the interrogator, no longer the power player. He was the proof. That corruption doesn't start in the shadows. It starts in plain sight, smiling, shaking hands, signing checks. And tonight, the handshakes had been caught on tape, and the world was taking names. The silence in the studio was unbearable, not just uncomfortable, but heavy, alive, as if the walls themselves were trying to absorb the weight of what had just been revealed. Kash Patel sat motionless. His fingers twitched, his chest rose and fell, but his eyes, they were gone, empty, hollow. Ibrahim Traoré remained still. No celebration, no gloating, only truth, delivered like a scalpel. Anderson Cooper cleared his throat, tried to restore the air of order. "Director Patel," he said, voice trembling, "do you have any response?" Patel looked up, his face pale, broken, tears forming at the edges of his eyes. He opened his mouth. No words came. Then a whisper, I need a lawyer." A single tear fell, and Ibrahim, without hesitation, nodded once. "Of course you do. You will need a very good one, because as of tonight, you are facing charges in at least 7 countries. The camera zoomed in on Patel, his tie now loosened, his posture crumbled, the arrogance gone, the confidence evaporated. All that remained was a man unmasked, and then he stood abruptly, ripping off his microphone, unplugging his earpiece, turning toward the exit without a word. "Mr. Patel," Anderson said, "we still have 20 minutes left on the broadcast." But Patel didn't turn back. He was already moving, already running. His footsteps echoed through the hallway. And Ibrahim? He didn't flinch. "Let him go," he said quietly. "A man who trafficked hundreds of souls does not deserve another second of airtime." And just like that, the chair was empty. The screen showed an abandoned seat. Moments earlier, it had held one of the most powerful men in the US government. Now, it was just a symbol of collapse, of truth catching up to power. In the control room, producers scrambled. But outside the studio, things were already in motion. Federal agents had been watching the broadcast live, so had the FBI, so had Interpol. And while Patel fled the building in a black government-issued SUV, a blockade had already been deployed. 2 miles from CNN headquarters, blue. Lights flashed, screeching tires. He never saw it coming. He was yanked from the car, handcuffed. Read his rights right there on a live feed broadcast by CNN's own field team. Back in the studio, Anderson turned to the camera. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "we have just received confirmation. Kash Patel has been arrested by federal authorities. This is no longer just a broadcast. This is the beginning of one of the largest criminal investigations in US intelligence history." Ibrahim remained calm, but the weight in his voice was heavier now. "We are not done," he said. "The trafficking network exposed tonight is only part of the machinery. We have evidence of assassinations, of money laundering, of national secrets sold to hostile powers." Anderson looked stunned, speechless again. "How far does this go?" he finally asked. Ibrahim's eyes didn't blink. "Farther than you think." Behind him, a new document appeared on screen. A list. 47 names, US officials, military contractors, foreign intermediaries, some willing participants, others blackmailed into silence. This, Ibrahim said, is not about one man. It's about a culture of impunity. And tonight that ends. Back at CIA headquarters, chaos unfolded. Computers seized, offices sealed, dozens of agents placed under immediate suspension. And outside? Thousands of people gathering, not to protest but to watch, to witness the fall of an empire built on lies. As cameras zoomed in on Patel being loaded into a federal vehicle, the world didn't cheer, it didn't jeer. It held its breath, because something rare had just happened. A truth, long buried, had clawed its way to the surface, and for the first time, it had won. Ibrahim stood up from his seat, one last look into the camera. To the victims, he said, to the families, to every honest agent and every betrayed community. This is your justice. This is your day. And as the screen faded to black, the world knew history had just been rewritten. 6 months later, the world was no longer the same. What began as a televised interview had exploded into a full-scale international reckoning. Kash Patel sat in a maximum security federal prison, awaiting trial for treason, for human trafficking, for murder, for selling national secrets. He had been stripped of every title, every privilege, and most importantly, every illusion. The trial would span months, multiple jurisdictions, dozens of charges, hundreds of victims, but justice had already started. Walking, and the man who sparked it was no longer in Burkina Faso. President Ibrahim Traoré had arrived in Washington, D.C. This time, not as a target, not as a victim, but as a hero, as a strategist, as a guest of the United States government, invited by the newly appointed CIA Director to help restructure the agency he helped expose. The two met behind closed doors, but the impact spilled out across every headline. Traoré to help rebuild the CIA, from target to architect of reform. The Traoré Doctrine, truth before diplomacy. At a televised ceremony on Capitol Hill, Ibrahim was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, America's highest civilian honor. The room was filled with lawmakers, diplomats, and journalists. But the applause? It came from real people, survivors, families of fallen agents, former whistleblowers. The moment was raw, not just a celebration, but a collective exhale. In his acceptance speech, Ibrahim didn't thank politicians. He didn't glorify institutions. He simply said, "This medal does not belong to me. It belongs to the victims, to the families, to those who were silenced but not forgotten." The room went silent. "I was never fighting against America," he continued. "I was fighting for it, for what it could be, for what it promised. And for those who still believe justice is not a luxury but a right." His voice didn't rise, but it echoed. Across social media, across borders, across broken systems trying to rebuild. The US government launched Operation Clean Core, an internal purge of compromised officials. 47 people arrested, including 1 senator, 3 members of Congress, 2 retired generals, the largest anti-corruption sweep in American history. The Washington Post called it the moment America faced itself and chose truth. CNN ran a follow-up interview with Ibrahim. This time, no confrontation, just clarity. When asked how he uncovered it all, he simply said, "We listened. We connected dots others ignored. We refused to be scared of the truth." His calm became contagious. Other countries followed. Ghana opened an inquiry into foreign interference. Brazil re-examined military base agreements. France held emergency hearings on intelligence leaks. And everywhere, young leaders began invoking the Traoré effect, proof that courage, transparency, and methodical strategy could shake giants and build something better. The global ripple became a wave. Back in Burkina Faso, Ibrahim's approval ratings soared, but he didn't stop there. He invested in forensic, education, in cyber defense teams, in whistleblower protections, and above all, in the message that truth had no nationality, no age, no color. In 2026, Ibrahim was nominated and awarded a second Nobel Peace Prize. The citation read, "For exposing systemic corruption in global intelligence and promoting transparency as a path to peace." He accepted it in Oslo, humbly, quietly, just like everything else he had done, and in his speech he said, Kash Patel tried to weaponize power to protect criminals. But what he forgot is that truth does not answer to titles, justice does not kneel to fear, and history belongs to those who choose light over shadows. A standing ovation followed, but more importantly, a shift. Untanti in twine. Schools, Ibrahim's name became part of leadership curricula. In courts, his case became a reference in international law. And in homes, people spoke of him as what leadership should be, not loud, not ruthless, but principled, relentless, and fearless, because sometimes justice doesn't need rage, it needs patience, focus, and the courage to say, enough, and because one man chose to say it, the world began to heal. Let's stop here for just a moment. Let's take a deep breath, because what you've just heard wasn't a movie, it wasn't fiction, it wasn't a dramatization, it was real. It was the true story of a young African leader who exposed the darkest corners of one of the world's most powerful institutions, live, in front of 200 million people. No special effects, no backup plan, just courage and proof. It began with one invitation, a simple request for an interview, but by the time it ended, our criminal empire had collapsed, and a global intelligence agency stood face to face with its reflection. Let that sink in. One man, armed not with weapons, but with documentation, determination, and an unshakable belief that justice was more important than tradition. He didn't shout, he didn't rage. He spoke like a surgeon cuts, clean, precise, purposeful. And while the world watched, a liar fell apart, and the truth stood tall. So ask yourself, what would you have done if you had those documents? If you knew the truth? Would you risk your life, your country's reputation, your own future? Ibrahim Traoré did, because he believed. Something too many people forget. Power without integrity is weakness disguised as strength. But truth is oxygen. You can suppress it, hide it, bury it. But eventually it rises, and when it does, it clears the room, it clears the air, and it clears the way forward. Now think about where we are today. Reformed CIA, dozens of trials underway, international investigations opened, a second Nobel Peace Prize, and still Ibrahim remains grounded, still working, still watching, still fighting for a world where leadership means service. Not secrecy, not cruelty, but accountability. And to those watching this story right now, if you're still with us, if your heart is still pounding, that's not just adrenaline, that's clarity, that's your conscience realizing that truth like this isn't just rare, it's revolutionary. So what now? You share this, you talk about it, you ask hard questions, you demand transparency. Because justice isn't a one-time event, it's a practice, it's a choice. And in a world where silence is often rewarded, speaking up can still change everything. Let this story be more than a headline. Let it be a blueprint for journalism, for leadership, for courage. And if you're wondering how to help, it's simple. Refuse to look away, refuse to forget. And when you hear something that feels wrong, ask questions, ask twice, ask until the answers match the truth. Because sometimes the most powerful weapon on earth is someone willing to say, no. This was Celebrity Undercover Stories, and what you witnessed here was not just the fall of Kash Patel, it was the rise of something greater, the rise of responsibility, of reckoning, and of a new kind of leadership, not hidden, not afraid, but, finally, undeniably awake. So hit the like button, share this story, leave a comment below, and tell us, what does justice mean to you? Until next time, stay aware, stay brave, and never underestimate the power of one man armed with the truth.